to Appropriations Subcommittee, Public Safety. What we're going to hear today are some House bills, and typically they have fiscal impacts. A lot of these bills have already made it through respective committees and have been referred to us because of the fiscal impact. Some of them have come directly to us because of a fiscal impact. We're not really here today too much to debate policy. We're here today to debate whether we have enough money to fund these things. So please try to keep that in mind, and we're going to do as good as we can. So we've got a sign-up sheet. We'll try to go down this. Some folks will skip because they're in committees, but we'll come back to them. Is John Bell here? How about Greg Habib? Delegate Foy? Delegate Heredick? That's all. Delegate Jones?
Yeah.
Oh, here he is. Okay. And Delegate Jones, your House Bill 260.
That's correct.
Okay, give us a second to get to the right page. Okay. Delegate Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I won't go into too much detail about the bill itself, but it really does create a missing persons alert for critically missing and abducted people. This stems from a situation that took place in Hampton Roads over the course of the fall, in which an 18-year-old girl was abducted from a naval base and was not found until several weeks later in Charlotte, North Carolina. Unfortunately, she was found behind a church after she had been murdered. The family came to me and asked me if I could help do something about this, and I discovered, and I did not know before I put this bill in, that we have an amber alert for people who are up to 17 years old, and a silver alert for those who are 60 and above, but there is nothing for those of us who fall in between the ages of 60, which is most of the folks in this room. And so what we have done is we've worked very closely with the state police, the Sheriff's Association, and law enforcement to craft this piece of legislation, which is very similar to amber and silver, and that it's permissive and lets the state police define this. And what they have told me is that it is about $50,000 to update the computer systems that we've already got, to do a push text alert, to do the billboards, the TV, and some other things are federal, so that is being worked on by Congressman Scott Taylor. What I do believe is that this is a big bang for your buck project, and that it can end up saving a lot of lives over the course of this legislation.
Okay, and Delegate Jones, you did say that Congressman Taylor, they went to him, and then of course, knowing that he couldn't do it so much federally, and you wanted to do something on a statewide effort. So thank you for your efforts. Is there any questions by committee of the delegate? Let me go this way. Is anyone here to oppose this measure? I didn't think so.
Mr. Chairman, as a 61-year-old, this doesn't apply to me, but I really do appreciate you bringing it. I really do appreciate you bringing it for the rest of my district, so I move to report this fine bill.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to report. Delegate McQuinn?
I just wanted to say, actually, you know what, I know you've gone to, I think this is to 60 years old, is that too?
It's 18 to 60 years.
Yeah, because, but we also have another population of folks who, and it really probably should have gone older, those who have Alzheimer's dementia. I mean, it's always coming across the TV screen where someone is lost and they can't find it, and I know there've been one individual that was found that when they found him, the person was dead, but, so we, you know, at some point we might want to look at creating this situation for, you know, catching that.
We have the silver alert.
Yes.
I think they're included.
Oh, we do?
The silver's in place. I will say that silver and amber both have 5 criteria. What we have tried to do here is to write this bill so that the state police, who are the experts who know what they're doing, are going to find the right people. And I think
Thank you.
Okay, please cast your vote. Delegate Jones, by a vote of 7-0, the measure moves forward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you. I think I saw Delegate Floyd come in. Yes. Delegate Floyd, we've got some good news and some bad news for you. And which number are we on this? Please direct your attention for a minute to 444. And Delegate Floyd, we've got where we just got a fiscal impact on this, literally just a couple of minutes ago. We haven't had a chance to look at it, dissect it. We're going to have a full appropriations meeting tomorrow, but we're going to convene this one for you so we can figure that out. So, want to let you know that, so if, you could have a motion to buy for the day.
So moved. Second.
Okay, all in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
And we'll see you tomorrow, but we'll notify you on this.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, let's see, Delegate Hoagie. Oh, there you are, Brenda. Let's see, House Bill 681.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 681 requires Department of State Police to issue a concealed carry permit to a non-resident within 45 days, although we will entertain amendments to 90 days. The bill provides the department shall certify the non-resident application within the 45-day period.
Turn your speaker on. Delegate Hoagie.
Keeps going off.
Is that it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you hear?
Yeah.
That's on, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, did you hear my bill?
I did, except for the part about the 90-day amendment. I didn't get a motion on that, so continue.
Okay, well, basically, the current turnaround time for the manual process is about 120 to 150 days, which is a very long time for people to wait, and the belief is that it could be done in 45 to 90 days.
I noticed that, is there anyone on the committee to ask Delegate Hoagie any questions? Is anyone here to speak in favor of this measure? Yes, sir, very shortly.
Philip Bennett, President of the Virginia Citizens Defense League. This was brought to our attention by several people from out of state, and I couldn't believe, because they used to do these in 2 weeks, and I had no idea that these people were waiting almost 6 months. Lieutenant Hook testified in the other committee that what's happening here is that they're getting $100 for each permit they process, which is double what we get charged for an in-state permit. That goes into the general fund, and the state police only get back $35 of the $100. So they are underfunded to process the number of people that are applying for these. The state has the money. It just took 2/3 of it and is hanging on to it in the general fund. If they passed that back to the state police, they would have a total of about $1 million, plenty of money to hire the people they need to process these in the right time frame. This wasn't meant to be a moneymaker for the state. That's the problem. It's become a moneymaker.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else here to speak to this measure? Delegate Hoagie, we know that we kind of checked into this a little bit, and we found out that it looks like the state police are really kind of escalating this up a little bit, I think probably since you put your measure in. But the fiscal impact is kind of indeterminate, but I want to let you know that. Committee?
With that being said, I move to carry over. Second.
Okay, that's a voice vote, I believe.
Correct.
Okay, all in favor of the motion to carry over to Rule 22, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Okay. Delegate Toscano. Delegate Freitas.
He seemed to think is he here?
No, no.
He seemed to think his bill was okay now. Do we want to go ahead and deal with it? I don't think he's coming back.
Well, we're gonna wait a while on that. Delegate Bagby. Wait, I'm skipping the members on the committee. Delegate Corey.
She's in committee, but we'll get on her way.
Okay. Delegate Krizik, I'm gonna hold off on you too. Delegate Stolly. Okay, we got to the bottom. Delegate Rome. Hey. 938, House Bill 938, please. Give us just a second, let us get to it. And, okay, everyone got it? Okay, Delegate Rome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the subcommittee. House Bill 938 provides that the Virginia State Police establish a centralized cold case database searchable by the public. I submitted a budget amendment for $450,000 based on Delegate Simon's predecessor's bill from some years ago that didn't go through. Well, we were real thrilled to find out that this one came back a lot less than that. This one came back at $100,000 to modify their website, and it has an ongoing cost for one full-time employee to run it for $93,143. So this came back at well under half the cost of what we had actually projected. The bill is intended to help the state police solve crimes and bring violent criminals to justice with a comprehensive database open to the public. It provides more resources for our hard-working law enforcement officers without cumbersome mandates beyond what the state police told us they need to make the database produce results. In Connecticut, by the way, their cold case database has helped state police solve 40 crimes from the tips that have come in from it. And I hope it will be the will of the subcommittee to approve the funding for HB 938. Thank you.
Any questions at this point? Okay, is anyone here to speak in favor of this measure? Anyone here to speak in opposition to this measure?
Mr. Chairman, was anyone here from the police department, from the state police?
I don't know, you can answer.
Yeah, I like that.
Is anyone here from the state police?
Mr. Chairman, I'm from the State Police Association, but I'm not here to represent the Department of State Police, so I can't speak for them.
You've been retired a little while, haven't you?
I don't think so.
See you later.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I think this is probably a really good idea. I'm just curious, the state police, looks like they put fiscal impact on this of about 200 in the first year and another 100 in the second year. And a lot of that is for a one-time website development. I wish there was someone from state police here that, like Delegate McQuinn had asked, because in social services in a lot of areas, there are a lot of grant sources available, that are out, like Andy B. Casey Foundation does a lot of stuff in foster care, et cetera. I guarantee you there are some law enforcement friendly, other victim advocate groups nationally that might even be willing to do a public-private partnership on this. But we don't know the answer to that because they're not here, so.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay.
I'll make a motion.
Yes, sir.
I can say, Delegate Rome, I've got a bill up later today in this same subcommittee, and I've put it in, I think, 4 or 3 years in a row, David. And the cost has come down over the years through the state police, so I'll make a motion to table this and hope that you could come back with it and maybe we can work on it a little more.
May I ask a question, Mr.
Hold on a
Chairman?
second. Get a second.
Second.
Okay, there's that is a non-debatable motion, so we're gonna go ahead and cast your vote. Okay, by a vote of 5-2, the measure laid on the table.
Yes, I did, but.
5-3.
5-3, okay, 5-3. Are there any other delegates here that have a measure before us not on the committee? Okay, y'all are legislative aid, we'll find them. We'll take. Delegate Tyler, would you like to do your bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My House bill is number 1418, and I have amendment and made to the substitute.
Delegate Tyler, you said 1418?
Yeah.
Okay, and you have a substitute. Okay.
Second.
Okay, well, substitutes for us, all in favor of substitute, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the measure is the substitute before us. Hold on just a second, let me grab the substitute. Do I have one here? Okay. Okay, Delegate Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Basically, the bill now, we have worked along with the Department of Corrections, with Ms. Barber in Corrections, and come up with a bill, that some of the change in the language that does not add a physical impact. And basically now it's just a procedural process, and it can be handled in-house, so it doesn't add any cost for any extra employees or anyone of that nature.
Delegate Tyler, this is, I see where it's being notified of all charges in writing and trying to get them when they're there, so you don't have to come back.
All right.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I have a motion.
Let me- is there,
Mr. Chairman, just before that.
Okay.
As a quick point, Delegate Tyler, just remind you, even though they can absorb this now in their departments, and we certainly get that a lot, next year they'll come back and say, well, we need to have more money for our, not just this bill, but in general, as you well know. These things that are indeterminate make it just very difficult, but I'm supportive.
Is there anyone here to speak to this measure? And let me put it this way, because I think I know which way this is going, I'll save you some time. Anyone here to speak in opposition? I thought so. Okay.
Move
Delegate
to
Pace.
report the substitute.
Second.
Okay. Oh, you want to second your own bill, huh? Okay, well, there's a motion and a second on the floor. Please cast your vote. Delegate Tyler, by a vote of 8-0, the measure reports to full committee. Okay. Thought I saw Delegate Stolly here, and I do. And sir, you're next. And your measure is 1103.
Mr. Chairman, I'm ready to report.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
And you're not on this committee.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on just a second, let us get to it, sir.
Page 7.
It's okay, everyone got it? Delegate Stolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 1103 is brought forth by the Joint Subcommittee on Coastal Flooding. What we're trying to do here with this bill is to ensure that small businesses after disaster can get up and functioning more quickly. What we have is about 1 out of every 4 small businesses never reopen their doors after declared disaster. What this does is simply waive the fees for permitting following a disaster.
Thank you. Any questions of the patron?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Delegate Stolly, so the information that I have looking at this, as best I can determine, it's very indeterminate about the non-general fund revenue that we would potentially forego. And a lot of these, obviously, these different agencies need that non-general fund revenue that pays for a lot of their expenses. But sewage disposal systems and private wells and drinking water wells and restaurants and hotels and campgrounds and summer camps and swimming pools, all with Department of Health, and a number of DBA, the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, group homes, private community-based mental health facilities, and obviously the DSS, daycare centers, adult day. Have you got any other insight as to what that, those non-general fund revenue impacts might be, or is it just truly indeterminate?
That's a great question, and the answer is no, I don't. And the aspect of it that I think is important here is that these folks have already paid this fee once. They're already up and functioning. They've paid to have these inspections and these permits done. They are in a disaster area, and they're affected by the disaster like anyone else would be. We're trying to minimize. We do a lot of disaster funds in these areas during these times that folks have not paid into before. And so waiving these fees is part of that aspect of recovery and getting these businesses back up and functioning.
Mr. Chairman, so Delegate Stolly, although as I get that, I understand if they've already paid it, but is this not also include renewal fees that might happen during that 6-month time period? In other words, there's a disaster January 1, your bill would now allow any new fees or renewal fees for the next 6 months. If one of these entities were to have renewal fees that were supposed to come up in February, that would be foregone. Is that correct? My understanding?
I would say yes, that is correct. So again, we're trying to get these folks
Sure.
up and functioning. If we don't get them up and functioning, the longer they're down, the greater the impact is on the economy and the harder it is to take them recover.
Very fair point. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Can we just speak to the bill real quickly? It seems to me that we don't know how many disasters are gonna occur, so it's not something you really budget for. The renewal fees is something I'm concerned about but the disasters, just as they happen, they happen. It's kind of the will of God that they happen, and so so it's not like there's revenue that's like foregone or lost, because it wouldn't be something you'd expect, right? So I think this is great. I like this. I think this is a very good way to enhance the disaster relief efforts as well, and get these guys back up. Thank you.
Is anyone here to speak to this measure?
Committee members, delegate, I'm Jeff Stern. I'm the state coordinator at the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. Delegate Stolly raises a very important issue. Getting businesses back online is really critical to recovery. However, The agency and the administration opposed this bill because it delegates our agency to certify businesses in order to be able to get these waivers. And we really don't have a role or authority in certifying the thousands of businesses across Virginia. So very respectfully, we hope there would be another solution to this important matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes,
could
sir.
speak to that briefly. So, as part of the disaster, these businesses are gonna be filing paperwork, with the Virginia Department of Emergency Management anyhow. This would be very simple to include with that, paperwork that they're already doing. All that needs to be done is an acknowledgement that this business does need re-permitting and that this business is in a disaster area. I know that they've talked about 2 FTEs and a lot of money, but it's really not that hard. They're already in the area and they're already receiving the paperwork to take to do this. But I am absolutely happy to work with VDM on any issues that they may have forward as we move forward with this bill.
Okay, committee?
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion.
Yes.
I think, given testimony we've heard, I would move that we carry this over, allow the delegate, in fact, to continue to work with BDEM and address this. I think Delegate Krizek has addressed it. Delegate Stahl, you've done a great job, that these are issues that happen. But I would move that we carry over under Rule 22.
Have a second? Second. Okay. More discussion? Okay. Voice vote, sure. All in favor of the motion to carry this bill over to Rule 22, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate Stahl. Delegate Harrington?
Chairman, this is House Bill 1527, the Civil Air Control Bill.
This was all this version. No, this was Scott.
Zero financial, I haven't seen that.
You want to do it? I think you're good on this.
Good on that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. Everyone got a copy? Okay. Delegate Heretic, I think it's a little bit appropriate that you're talking about Civil Air Patrol and a former member of this body who is in charge of the Aerospace Caucus just walked into the room. Welcome.
And Mr. Chairman, I would note that the former chair of Science and Technology, the Honorable Rich Anderson, better known as Brigadier General Richard Anderson, is the former national commander of the Civil Air Patrol. So his timing is, if nothing, impeccable.
He has a nice safe landing. Okay, go.
And so may my bill, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members, House Bill 1527 would basically extend certain employment protections to the 2,200 Virginians who serve on volunteer basis in the Civil Air Patrol. As we all know, the Civil Air Patrol provides vital services to all of us here in the Commonwealth, including, the governor of the Air Force, VDEM, and others in search and rescue missions and disaster relief. They work with VDOT to help us monitor our highways and roadways, and frankly, they support the Virginia State Police in certain law enforcement operations. Mr. Chairman, members, 1527 would essentially apply the same basic job protections to members of the Civil Air Patrol who are called out for training or for missions that members of the Virginia National Guard and the Virginia Defense Force also receive. And that basically is this, that for not more than 10 days a year for training and not more than 30 days a year for emergency orders, members of the Civil Air Patrol would be protected under seniority. They would retain any accrued leave that they would have on the job, any benefits, and any efficiency ratings. If their employers see fit to pay them in addition, God bless them, but that's not required. Basically, this is simply keeping them in place in their jobs so they serve us, and that's all this bill does.
Any questions from the committee? Okay. Is there anyone here to speak to this measure?
Gentlemen.
Yes, sir.
I will, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Absolutely. Good to have you back, sir.
I was up on the 4th floor, Mr. Chairman, and got a text that this bill was to be heard. So this is totally off the cuff, without rehearsal or thought. But let me speak just for a moment about what I think the value-added commodity is here for our Commonwealth, and I speak from a fellow who was privileged to serve as National Commander of the Civil Air Patrol, which at the national level was 65,000 members performing air search and rescue, disaster relief, and other emergency services missions for the federal, state, and local governments. There are many states, and I saw this from my perspective in dealing with the various Civil Air Patrol wings. Each state is called a wing. Many states do this, so it's not without precedent in a lot of states of the country. And it just simply provides with a mechanism by which individuals can engage in the training that's necessary in order to provide actual emergency services missions to the federal, state, and local governments. And they do this on behalf of the Department of the Air Force, and their non-combat missions as assigned by the Secretary of the Air Force. The organization has the largest fleet of Cessna aircraft in the country, some 560 aircraft, and here in Virginia, I think you cited the number 2,200. And so they are a vital part of it. I understand that it has been done in a way that there is no fiscal impact to the state whatsoever. And I'll conclude with this. The federal government provides one protection for Civil Air Patrol members, and it's this. For those Civil Air Patrol members that are either killed or injured in the line of federal, state, or local emergency services duties, they are covered by the Federal Employees Compensation Act, FECA or FECA, which will provide, in the case of death, a stipend for the surviving spouse, and in the case of injury, a certain stipend also. So the federal government recognizes the need to do that. This is pitched in a completely different way, though, and permits people to simply have time off of work, train, or conduct actual emergency services missions. And it's very comparable. If any of you are familiar with employer support for the Guard and Reserve, ESGR, it's very similar to that. So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to.
Well, I think you just sold us.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote on your electronic voting board. The motion is to report.
As amended.
8-0, Mr. Chairman.
As amended. Good. Are there amendments to this that were taken up in the committee?
It's not been full committee. We have here.
This is just different.
Okay. All right.
Okay, the motion reports, Delegate Harrington. Okay, and Delegate John Bell.
Mr. Chairman, this is HB 269, which would set a floor for the daily pay rate for our Virginia National Guard members when they're called into state active duty service. And basically this will raise it up to an equivalent of a Staff Sergeant E6 with 18 years of service. To put it in perspective, it's about $125 a day. The reason why the National Guard and the administration feel the need to do this is currently some of our lower-ranking folks are serving in instances like Charlottesville, and they're serving for basically $80 to $89.75 a day. If you look at the number of hours they're working, sometimes 14, 16 hours, particularly in these crisis situations, they would be making far less than a minimum wage. They don't get a per diem on those cases. They typically don't stay in hotels. They stay in cots in armories and are eating, oftentimes just whatever they can scramble to eat, which could be one of the MRE meals. So this is basically just to make sure that most employers don't pay a supplement when they go to serve. So it's making sure that they make enough so they can support their families. The estimate on this is to be $50,000 a year. It was in the governor's introduced budget, and the $50,000 covers approximately 3 events per year, which is what the average of these type of events has been in the past. And again, we rely on our National Guard in these intense situations, and this is just making sure that they get paid an amount where if they go to serve, they can still provide for their families, and it will help them to continue to serve honorably. Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer your question you might have.
Okay, any questions from the committee? Is anyone here to speak in favor of this measure?
Sir, Lieutenant Colonel Woodley with the National Guard. We're certainly in favor of the bill that provides basic fairness for our junior enlisted soldiers so that they aren't working for less than minimum wage in these situations.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else here to speak to this measure? Committee?
Mr. Chairman, substitute motion.
Okay, substitute motion.
The motion to lay the bill on the table.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion to lay the bill on the table. It's non-debatable. Please cast your vote. the 5-3, the bill's laid on the table. And it's, like we said earlier, I don't think you were in here, Delegate Bell, sometimes it's wonderful policy, but when we set a precedent, sometimes on a fiscal impact of what we got, looking at this year, so it has nothing to do with the policy.
Understand, thank you,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any other delegates this time? Okay, I'll tell you what, Delegate Peace, if you want to hold the gavel.
Mr. Chairman, I can do my bill if you like.
I was gonna do mine first. It's called.
Delegate Garrett, you're out of order.
It's called Chairman's prerogative.
Delegate Knight, Mr. Chairman.
This is a bill that was heard in general laws, actually in my subcommittee of ABC. It raised the license fees. That measure passed. It was sent up here because it has a fiscal impact of $839,000 to the positive. I think that's all I probably need to say.
Are there any questions of the delegate? Is there anyone here to speak in favor of the chairman's bill? Okay, anyone opposed to it? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the committee? We have a motion to report House Bill 826, recommend report House Bill 826 with the general laws amendments. Properly second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, please cast your vote on electronic voting board. Please close the roll. House Bill 826 report, recommended report at 8-0. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Now, Delegate Garrett.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 1440 is a bill that we bring forward every year to add specific drugs to our Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. This adds 1 drug to Schedule 1 and 2 drugs to Schedule 2. This is all worked out each year through the Board of Pharmacy and so forth. So that's in essence what the bill does. It does carry an indeterminate cost to the Commonwealth because of potential jailing, and that by the Woodrum Amendment requires a $50,000 fiscal impact. So.
And that's just standard what we put on
Yes,
these
sir.
things, so it's nothing unusual. Any questions from the committee? Is anyone here to speak to this measure? Okay, there's a motion and a second to report. Please cast your vote. Okay. By a vote of 8-0, the measure moves forward.
I thank the chairman and the committee.
Yes, sir. Okay, who else do we have? Delegate Rush. House Bill 366. Oh, and Delegate Rush, you have a line amendment? Okay.
Second.
All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and Delegate Rush, it's an enactment clause on the amendment, and the amendment says that the provisions of this act shall become effective on July 1st, 2019. That's a delayed enactment clause.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Can we go into policy or just?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So what this bill does is felony restoration of firearm rights. And so currently, there are 2 processes. You can get your if you're a felon, you get your civil rights back, and you go to another step to get your Second Amendment rights restored. And that's a process through the local circuit court. And so with this, what brought to my attention that information is not sent to it's sent to the state police, but not put into the central database. So if you're a former felon and you're pulled over with a firearm, the road officer has no way of knowing whether you have had your Second Amendment rights restored. So this was brought to me by a local police officer who pulled over a gentleman, and he was able to call back to the local clerk of court where that information is stored and get the information. He said, Delegate Rush, I would have had to, if this would have been 7 o'clock on Friday, he would have stayed in jail for the rest of the weekend. And so when I brought this bill up 3 years ago, I was also approached by an attorney who had a case where a gentleman was arrested. His shoulder was, his rotator cuff was torn, and he ended up suing the state police for I think it's $300,000 right there. And so, because he had had his rights restored, and this information was not available to the road troopers, deputies, or police officers. So I've worked with state police over the last few years, and right now we don't have a fiscal impact, and I think it's a policy that's very, very needed.
Okay, committee, any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I just know I should never leave the room again, because I left, we were talking about restoration rights. I came in here to talk about a torn rotator cuff.
Yes. You want me to start over?
No, sir.
My understanding, by adopting the enactment clause, that also eliminates any budget amendment requirement, which is our focus, so thank you very much.
Anyone here to speak to this measure? Okay, committee?
Move to report.
Second.
Okay, Delegate Quinn moves to report. We have a second. Please cast your vote, as amended.
Sorry, one moment, Mr. Chairman. Okay.
By a vote of,
No.
and Delegate Tyler, you're a yes?
I'm a yes.
Okay, by a vote of 8-0, the measure reports. Okay, Delegate, let's see, no other delegates in here yet. Delegate Kreisig?
Mr. Chairman, HB 381 is, creates a electronic summons, system fund for Virginia State Police. Currently, 21 local law enforcement agencies have this e-summons system, and it would allow them, and they already are charging the $5 fee at their level, and the Virginia State Police don't have this. Let me just tell you, one of the things I learned when I started here, when I was elected, I thought it was all about Fairfax County and Mount Vernon, and here I'm doing something that's against my own county. They testified against me, and I'm not happy. But I've realized that this is a big commonwealth, and we need to all work together, and this is really a safety issue. The Virginia State troopers are out there, and they reckon they could save about 10 minutes out of 15 writing these tickets with this electronic summons process, and they're putting their lives on the line for us, and I think this is the least we can do. And it's revenue neutral because it's got this $5 fee. And I do have the right.
Yes, sir, Mr. Huggins.
Mr. Chairman, Wayne Huggins, represents State Police Association. I'd like to thank Delegate Kreisig for carrying this bill for the state police. When he mentioned that Fairfax County was against the bill, he didn't tell you why Fairfax County was against it. They have this authority, we do not. And yet every ticket that's written by a trooper in Fairfax County, they are assessing the $5 fee on our tickets and keeping it for the Fairfax County Police. Now that's just wrong. Rockbridge County's doing the same thing. That makes us nothing more than revenue collectors for local law enforcement, and I think that is absolutely abhorrent. That is not the purpose of the state police. We shouldn't be used that way. So let me mention a few names to you, because what I really want to talk about is the safety aspect. J.A. Walker, Jessica Cheney, Mike Fox, Jose Cavazos, Jerry Hines, Ricky McCoy, Leo Witt, James Biggs, Robert Lohr, Robert Hill, Mike Blanton, Jacqueline Vernon, Harry Lee Henderson, and Jim Hughes. The last person I just named was my shift partner. These are all troopers who have been killed in the line of duty while on the shoulder of a road in Commonwealth, Virginia. Now, not all of these were issuing traffic summonses, but they were all either assisting motorists, investigating crashes, working in work zones, or issuing traffic summonses. The reason I mention this is it underscores the danger when we pull over somebody, pull up to somebody. Some of these people were hit, some of them were shot, some of them were run over. It's the single most dangerous thing that we do. But I want to personalize it even further. When I was a trooper, I averaged issuing about 1,300 summonses a year. If that estimate of 15 minutes per summons is correct, what that means is that I would spend 19,500 minutes sitting on the shoulders of the road in the Commonwealth of Virginia. If in fact it will reduce that stop from 15 minutes to 5 minutes, what that means is that would have saved me approximately 4.5 weeks a year from sitting on the shoulder of a road. This is an absolute necessity to provide safety to these troopers to get them out of these dangerous environments. The locals already have this tool. We created this tool, and yet we can't use it. The locals are using it and they're benefiting financially, and that's just absolutely wrong. So we're asking for your consideration to give us the same tools you've given local law enforcement, and please stop this practice of us being revenue collectors. That's just wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huggins. Okay, anyone else here to speak to this measure?
Hi, members of the committee. Ellen Buller on behalf of the Fairfax first, we do want to thank Delegate Krizak and the proponents of the bill for being gracious enough to talk with us and work with us. So it has been noted that the $5 fee when written by state and local officers currently for the jurisdictions that have the local e-summons system is retained at the local level. Our position is that that fee does impact and benefit both the state actors, the general district court, and also our local law enforcement. And so this bill would have a negative fiscal impact on us of about $200,000. And so just wanted to provide that feedback as you all weigh this. And thank you again to Delegate Krizak for as long as this work with us.
Thank you. Anyone else? Delegate Carey?
Mr. Chairman, perhaps a question for David. So David, last year we had a similar measure, and didn't we, I think we authorized about $3.8 million that went to the state police for an e-summons system, and how does that play into what we have before us today?
Yes, it was an identical bill that came before the committee yesterday. It was held, last session. It was held in full. We did provide for an appropriation in the House version of the budget to begin rollout of an e-summons system using general fund resources. Unfortunately, that fell out during conference last session, and so ultimately what we got was language that came back providing us with some estimated costs and what it would look like going forward as far as how state police could roll out an e-summons system within the courts that are currently accepting e-summons at this time.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman, just for my clarification, that was the House position then, as it reported from the House, going over to do the pilot program, in addition to the getting the salaries up as well for state police. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Chairman, I would, at the risk of incurring the wrath of Fairfax County further, I would note that they have had, in these counties that have been doing this, these jurisdictions, they've had 3 years of this income that rightfully should be shared with the state troopers, and most of that cost is incurred in the hardware costs are the big expense to get the system in each one of those troopers' cars, in the police cars, and so they've already got that part of the big expense is already taken care of, and they still have their Fairfax County police that will be writing tickets and bringing them money to keep the system going. I'm sure we can argue about how much is necessary, but I would say that it's not going to be as big a burden as we might think on the localities.
Thank you. Okay. Committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I have a motion.
Okay.
Move to lay House Bill 381 on the table.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to lay the bill gently on the table. Please cast your vote. Okay, 5 to 3, the bill is laid on the table, but Delegate Krizak, I'm gonna tell you this. This measure's been tabled, but we still are looking at this, and something may happen to look at it further sooner rather than later.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay, Delegate Toscano?
It's just like, we just don't like you.
That's what I was afraid of.
Delegate Toscano, right there at the podium, please, and you have 1249.
This is a DNA bill that you've heard, I think, a zillion times, right?
Okay,
DOA bill,
Is this a DNA bill?
Oh, we'll see.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay,
It's a DNA bill that you've heard a million times.
Okay.
And I think what we decided to do.
Delegate, we've got House Bill 1249, and I believe we have a couple of line amendments.
That's right.
Move the amendments, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Yes, sir.
We have the amendments, before us. All in favor of the amendments, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Delegate Toscano.
Yes, I believe the line amendments hopefully takes it down to 3 misdemeanors that would be added: assault and battery as a family member, and trespass, 2, the first 2, right?
Yes, sir.
And the reason for that is we got it down, the fiscal impact down on, is Kristen here? We got the fiscal impact down to $41,000, and so because of that, we want to modify the bill so that we put in just the 2 misdemeanors instead of 4.
You want to, Delegate Toscano, there's a backstory to this.
There's a backstory.
If you could give us the short version on that, it's, I think it's very pertinent.
Sure. Several years ago, a guy named Jesse Matthews kidnapped and murdered Hannah Graham, who was at the University of Virginia. Ms. Graham is here today in the committee room. And we subsequently found out that Mr. Matthew had been tried and convicted of certain offenses several years earlier. And if we had taken his DNA at the time he had been convicted of the misdemeanor offense, that DNA would have been in the database when there was another crime committed in Fairfax, where the DNA would have matched Jesse Matthew. That other crime in Fairfax occurred several years before Hannah Graham was ever murdered. So we potentially would have gotten Jesse Matthew for that earlier crime, and he would have never met Hannah Graham. And that's why this bill is here before you, because we think that if we put more DNA in the database, we can get criminals much easier. We can also, a sidebar on that is, the more DNA in the database, the more likely we can exonerate people who are innocent of crimes as well.
Delegate Creed.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say 2 things. One is that I was on the crime commission when we went through this, and I think they did a great job of figuring out just how important this is, and that's why we brought it forward. There were a number of other lesser offenses that they're not included in this final version. And the second thing I want to say is the Graham family are my constituents, and my daughter goes to the same high school that their daughter went to. And if we can save 1 life for this, this is a small amount of money, and I think it's well worth it. And I don't want this to happen to any other student, any other young.
Would you like to make the motion?
I would love to make the motion.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
So before that, I just want to make sure the delegate didn't misspeak, or David or something, because I thought what you said is we would keep.
We're talking 2. We got straight at 2.
We're 2.
2.
Trespass is no longer in this, and nor petty larceny.
No.
Okay, I thought you
That's what the amendment does.
So what is in
Well,
here?
the amendment does that, but I just want to make sure the delegate didn't misspeak or isn't aware that we're taking trespass out.
You've already got it straight. Okay.
We have, Mr. Graham would like to speak because leaving trespass out does.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing me to speak. I wouldn't otherwise have addressed you, except that the amendments were news to me. Jesse Matthew was convicted of criminal trespass in 2010. And if his DNA had been tested after his conviction for that offence, he would have been connected to the previous heinous crimes of brutal sexual assault and attempted murder in Fairfax City in 2005, and the abduction and murder of Morgan Harrington in 2009 in Charlottesville. And he would have been in jail, this is my proposition, he would have been in jail in September 2014. He would not have abducted and murdered Hannah, and she would be alive today. The bill as amended would not have saved her life. And I think that I would urge you to give consideration for including trespass within that, within the bill. An offence for criminal trespass, in my view, suggests a complete disregard for boundaries, and it would be a great disappointment to me if the bill didn't go forward with the very offence that Jesse Matthew was convicted of, and that could have saved Hannah's life. I think, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of options here.
Yes, sir.
If we were to strike domestic assault and battery and insert trespassing in its place, we would get to about the money that is in the number that we provided to you earlier, the 41,000. So we still would have 2. It just would be trespassing and assault and battery. Domestic assault and battery would come out. That would get the number to be about the same, which I think is what we would want to hit.
Well, you know, we're doing 2 things. We're doing the policy,
right,
which we understand that, we're doing what we can afford.
Right.
And this is going to be a recommendation,
yes,
to full committee.
Yes.
So I probably don't see any harm in that, but you might wanna show
I'll
the
show
full
up the full committee. But I think if someone would move to remove domestic assault and battery and insert trespassing, I think that would get at what we really wanna get at.
Let's, give us a second, we'll try to get that straight. Can you find that in there? You see the sections? Do you wanna do that for us, David? Or, we know what we're doing, we just wanna try to
Yes,
make
I
sure we get
understand.
it right.
Page 2 code sections are 18.257 and 18.2-1.
I tell you, Delegate Toscano, what we're gonna do, since we're on the fly here, we're gonna probably, Delegate Krizik's probably gonna move the report as it is, and if we can work this out for this trade between now and full committee, but we're kinda on the fly here. This'll move the measure forward. You know what we're dealing with when we get to full committee.
Yes, and I'll come to full committee.
Okay.
Great, so thank you.
So I make the motion, to move it as amended.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor of that motion? I'm sorry. Almost did it. I have a vote of Delegate McQuinn. Did you abstain?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's fine. There's by a vote of 7-0, 1 abstention.
Don't ask me why.
Yes. The measure goes
Great,
forward.
thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Let's see, who do we have here? Okay, Delegate Trust Head.
It's not personal, I just have to get yours. That's a great bill.
Yeah, but he's voting against it.
Well, I tell you, Delegate Corey.
Oh, I just wanted to be sure you knew I was here.
No, you go right ahead, Corey. Right on up here. Yes, ma'am. And we got Delegate Ferris here. He's such a small little wallflower. We didn't even see him. Delegate Ferris, you're next, sir. Okay, Delegate Corey. She has House Bill 83.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for accommodating one more delegate with a crazy schedule. As you all probably know, HB 83 is about providing menstrual supplies to incarcerated women. However, before I tell you why that's so important, we need to, I hope you'll accept the amendment in form of substitute.
Well, we don't have to.
You don't
We don't
have
have to.
it?
It's before us as amended.
Oh, it is,
It was
okay.
amended in
Militia and police.
Militia and Police.
Yeah, I didn't know that I didn't have to do it again.
No, ma'am.
All right, great. I do need to let you know that I asked for another FIS that would accompany the amended bill. And the bottom line is that as the first FIS, I'm sorry, I'm getting out of breath. The departments involved have said that they could absorb the costs. And there would be no budget impact and no budget amendment needed. So, I know
Delegate Corey, we've got two choices on this.
Okay.
If the department said they'll absorb the cost, and they promised that they're gonna do this, then we don't need the bill. But if the delegates on this committee still want to go forward, I don't think it does any good, but we'll do whatever y'all want to do on this measure. So.
I understand.
If any, okay, Delegate Corey, what would you like to do?
Well, I have one more procedural question.
Okay.
If you don't do if you don't act on the bill, then where does the bill end up?
Well, if we don't act on the bill, there will be no action. You know, so there will not be anything in code. But if they've told us they're gonna do this, then I don't believe we need the legislation. Billy McQuinn?
Mr. Chair, I guess my question would be, if we do nothing, there is, you know, they said they could absorb it, and that's great. We could let them do that, but if we do nothing in terms of taking any kind of official vote and saying that this is we want them to move forward with it, then is it an option for them? I mean, because this is, you know, we can do it, some may do it, some may not. I mean, that's.
Billy McQuinn, if you'd like to go forward, we can go forward.
Okay, I think that's probably because then it put a little juice behind it.
And,
Okay.
you know, if you want us to, we'll take a motion right now.
Move report.
Second.
I do.
Okay. Is there any discussion? All in favor of this measure, please cast your vote. The measure reports by a vote of 7-0.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I saw Delegate Baggy.
Well, I saw, we've got that. We'll,
Okay.
Delegate Ferris. Please give your attention to him. It's House Bill 1398.
Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, House Bill 1368 just allows a Virginia resident.
1398, is that correct, Delegate Ferris?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I say 68.
Yes, sir.
I thought I did. I didn't mean to. 1398 allows a Virginia resident to submit an application for a new concealed handgun permit by mail. Currently, only persons who have previously issued can do it by mail. But, Mr. Chairman, I guess it's our thoughts that doesn't matter what you look like. If that was the case, they probably wouldn't let me do much at all. But,
Delegate Ferris, this does not have a fiscal
it
impact.
doesn't seem
correct?
to have much. It is something that's handled through the court system. So.
Is there anyone here that opposes this measure?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Andrew Ballard, Virginia Centre for Public Safety. We oppose the measure because we think the concealed handgun permit process is very important and it should be at some point a face-to-face operation, not just something that's done by mail or by distribution machine.
Okay, thank you. Is anyone here to speak to this measure? Yes, sir.
Philip Van Cleen, President of BCI, we support the measure. Basically, we still have to provide ID, we still have a sworn statement. We think this made a lot of sense.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak to this measure? Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move to report.
Lay it on the table.
I heard a motion and a second to report. All, please cast your vote. I didn't get a second on that. Okay, so there's a motion to report. Please cast your vote. By a vote of 4-3, the measure moves forward.
Thank y'all.
Okay. Who else do we have?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Talking to Chairman Jones and Delegate Deegan, if the committee's okay, is pass by this for today, this bill for today, and we'll deal with the full committee tomorrow.
Okay, give your attention to Delegate Habib, House Bill 1306, and the motion was to pass by for the day.
Second.
All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that bill's passed by for the day. We've got Delegate Bagby on House Bill 837, and he requested that his bill be carried over.
So, under Rule 22, Mr. Chairman.
Right, okay. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Let's see, we've got Delegate Freitas. Does anyone know the status of that? Let's look at that real quick. 541. Let me get to that page for a second.
Mr. Chairman, I heard this in HW. I'd be happy to report to it, sir.
Okay, let's hold on. Let me get that page. Page 3. And okay, and Delegate Garrett,
Yeah,
you heard testimony?
Yes, sir.
Is there any objection in committee with him?
No.
Okay. Delegate Garrett.
Mr. Chairman, this bill, as it's been amended in HW, as amended through our Committee on Health, Welfare, and Institutions, this would require the Department of Veteran Services to review alternative treatments available for traumatic brain injuries and post-traumatic stress disorder and report its findings to the chairman of HWI as well as the Senate Committee on Education and Health by this November the 1st. The delegate is trying to get at the concept that there's lots of different ways to treat TBI, traumatic brain injury, and post-traumatic stress disorder, and he wants an exploration of those rather than just simply what are currently being used. And it was we amended it to this point rather than saying you'll get to go ahead and do those alternate treatments. We want the department to look at this and to give it a good review. So that's essentially the yes.
Delegate McQuinn.
So are they, when you talk about alternative treatments, are you talking about meds or you're talking about some other form of advanced, I guess,
So,
science or whatnot that would
I can actually answer these questions. I'm not just on the flyer.
Right.
So, Mr. Chairman, to that point, Delegate McQuinn and Delegate Krizak as well, what was presented in committee and in subcommittee as well was there are a lot of different modalities that are out there, whether there's psychotherapeutic modalities, different sorts of herbal modalities, different sorts of alternate treatments that are not mainstream, medical treatments that are out there today. You don't have to put them on an antidepressant. You don't need to put them on this particular type of psychoactive medication. You'd actually be able to consider these alternative treatments that have some promise or have some substantive. You have to have some sort of a scientific report or some sort of evaluation that shows it might have some promise. And again, as it's amended, Delegate McQuinn, this would put it in the posture where the department is going to actually be reviewing. And David, if I've misspoken relative to your understanding, please correct me, but that's my understanding.
Delegate McQuinn, that answer your question?
Yeah, just one more question, and so it goes to Health and Welfare and Senate Committee on Education and Health, okay, by November, whatever, so does it, we're voting on it, so would this also be public information so that others could have access to the final report?
Mr. Chairman, Delegate McQuinn, the answer is yes.
Okay.
And I think the reason why we chose that is because we anticipate Delegate Freitas with probably being legislation back to those two bodies of origin next year, and they could sort of be forewarned of some of those instead of now looking at them.
Is anyone here to speak to this measure? Okay, Delegate Krizak.
I move to report.
Move to report. Okay, any discussion? All in favor of that motion, please cast your vote. Okay, vote 7-0, the measure report is full committee. And the last bill is Delegate Head.
Mr. Chairman, this is House Bill 729, and with this, it directs the Department of Fire Programs to create a local standard for Firefighter 1 and Firefighter 2 certification, and also to establish some online training programs. The concern we have right now is that you've got some firefighters that are volunteering, but they can't get through the training programs quite as quickly, and there's not some online options for them, even though they should be. And the department has been in favor of doing this. It would in a lot of areas facilitate getting more volunteers out there when that's the only option that you have in a lot of our more rural areas of the Commonwealth. And while there is some money involved with this, I think that we found a source for this in non-general fund money that's already there and sufficient to absorb the one-time cost to get it set up. So hopefully we'll be able to take
Any questions from the committee? Is anyone here to speak against this measure? Committee?
Move to report.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. Please cast your vote. Okay, by a measure of 7-0, this measure reports. I believe that's all we have, but for a second, does the chairman of Appropriations have any words of wisdom for us?
I want to thank you all for all your hard work.
Okay, thank you. Committee shall rise.
Good words.